The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guest, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Broadcasting to you on WNN 1470 AM and TrentoVision.tv from the world's leading think tank laboratory, buried deep in an undisclosed building in hostile territory where evil and corruption is exposed. You're about to enter the Tom Trento Show.
Happy Monday to everybody out there in television and radio land. This is Tom Trento, your host on TrentoVision.tv and on WNN 1470. We wish and hope that all of you had a fabulous weekend. I think it's Memorial Day weekend next weekend, but we hope you had a wonderful time at shul if you're Jewish, and at church if you're a Christian. And
are you forgetting something?
Well, you know what? I have the Holy Quran right here. What better way to start off a Monday, May 20th, than to read from actually it's called the Noble Quran, this one right here. And as our audience, our listeners, and our viewers know, hi CJ, how are you doing over there? They just brought you in.
Oh, they brought me in.
Yes.
Thank you for the warning.
Today, Tom.
You have a new camera?
I have a new camera today.
Uh-oh.
Hi, everybody. Hi, hey.
Oh,
Look at you.
I see.
Look how fancy he
is.
The new camera that Mark has.
Yeah.
I have a little echo in here. The new camera that Mark has was my camera over here, my number one.
The one that he took away from
I stole
you?
your camera.
That's
Yes,
gone.
I did. I stole Tom's camera.
Okay, suppose the talent wanted to be in a single shot. How does that work?
How does that work?
Yes.
I go like that.
Oh, that's not too bad. Was it that camera?
Still that camera.
Tricky stuff.
That's what I was saying. Dave figured that out the other day. I said, "Oh, you get freed up a camera for
Freed
me."
up a camera. Pretty good. Yeah, I got a little echo on this thing.
Sorry, can't do anything
Can't
about
do
it.
anything about that.
So we're going to start the week with a Quran reading?
Well, we're going to tell people what we do. I run an organization, and everybody here is connected to it, so we're all going down. We're all going down. Called the United West. It is an organization, a counterterrorism educational organization, a 501c3.
Which means you can donate and get a tax write-off.
Well, it's tax exempt. We don't pay taxes.
Right.
To the IRS, and when someone makes a donation, they get a deduction.
Yes.
Now, we need to clarify the C4. We are not a C4. We're educational. But a C4 is tax exempt. It doesn't have to pay taxes, but it doesn't provide a tax exemption. So if you donate to a C4 $100, you don't get to donate that. You don't get to deduct that from your taxes. So the math lesson kiddies, don't donate to C4s. Donate to
the
us.
C3s.
C3s are better than C4s.
Yes, it's pretty easy to do that.
And we had our C3 a long time before they started all that nonsense.
Yeah, about 30 years, this one. So the bottom line is we exist, the United West, to defend the United States Constitution. The audio's good right there, that level right there. To defend the United States Constitution, to defend the state of Israel's right to exist, as bizarre as that sounds.
That is so big
I
of
know.
you, Tom.
We defend Israel's right to exist. Israel needs as many supporters.
And that means even us.
Even us, and we're a conglomerate of Jews, Christians, some Muslim folks, unicorns, Unitarians, all of that, atheists. We're all united around.
Unitarians.
Yeah. We're all united around the principles of the U.S. Constitution and the Judeo-Christian worldview. Let me add that, which excludes the Islamic worldview by design, and we're all about exposing this and that audio right there. Was ever touching audio buttons? Leave it right there.
Stop it.
We're all about exposing the Obama administration in its national security failures. That's primarily our sector of work, national security. I am one of the privileged 19 authors to Sharia, the Threat to America. Our special guest that you're going to hear from in a moment in our redo show here moving forward is also one of the authors. So you will hear from that lady in just a bit. But yeah, I think to lay a precedent to the weekend, I'll save the Noble Quran for later.
Okay.
Because there's so many things going on. If you just take a little stroll through the news, here's a lead story in a publication. If Obama is an early lame duck, he can blame himself. Good point. A note by the Boston bomber sheds light on his motive. The young guy, Tamerlan's brother, Jokar, he found a pen in that boat and scribbled a little note. Maybe at the end of the show we'll get into what he said. He basically said, Allahu Akbar! I'm doing this to defend Islam because the United States are killing Muslims improperly worldwide.
As opposed to properly killing them, right?
Uma Abedin had an incredibly sweet deal at the State Department.
Yes, she did.
So says the Atlantic Wire. We got a little special segment for you at the end
have
of
a Huma
this
update?
hour. Yeah,
We have a Uma update for you.
a little later. Clarion, our friends over at Clarion, the Muslim Brotherhood is inside the American colleges. Oh no, are they really?
Shocking.
The Brotherhood are in the colleges. Ooh. What is this little guy right here? Arab International Festival in Dearborn is canceled in the wake of religious tensions.
Do you mean other religions are not able to coexist with Islam in Dearborn?
Looks like we got the Crusades going on in Dearborn. Yeah, the Arab Fest, where we have been involved for 3 years now.
Where you've been assaulted year after year.
Mark was assaulted
Yes,
there.
I was assaulted there.
And Alan was assaulted, and Dave Wood, our friend Dave Wood. That's been canceled. A little town in New Jersey called Paterson, New Jersey, right next to where I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Yesterday raised the Palestinian flag over City Hall. No big deal. Maybe that's
No
why.
problem then. Nothing to see here. Moving on.
It was Palestinian Day in Patterson. Patterson, by the way, is so jihaded up, it isn't funny.
AKA.
Do they have colleges there?
Is there a direct bus from Dearborn to Patterson?
I think there is. Yeah, you can take the train if it doesn't derail. But that is the good state of Skinny Chris Christie. He's losing weight like crazy. We have a flag flying over a mosque in Israel. Did you know there are mosques in Israel?
Yes, many mosques.
Do you know
Many
that-
mosques in Israel.
You know, one of them right now in the West Bank has the
The
The-
Nazi flag?
the Nazi swastika flag
Yeah, that's
flying
not.
over it.
Yeah.
We have the Iraq tribal leaders of the war that we won. Obama calibrated down and got us out of Iraq, and right now they are starting another war, and it looks like they're calling for a federation there, all of that.
I think there are more people dying daily in Iraq than Syria right now.
It's crazy. And there's obviously a theme to all of these little headlines. The Justice Department has obtained records on Fox News journalist Jamie Rosen. You've seen Jamie Rosen. They're accusing Jamie Rosen now of leaking national security information. Seem to be. That's the way this is going. So, what is the deal with the Islamic agenda worldwide? Why is all this stuff percolating?
It's all about sex.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that?
And the Jews.
What do you mean about that?
Well, one of my headlines here is Muslim countries lead web searches for sex, goat sex, dog sex, rape, gay sex, ass sex, bird sex, and sexy child.
Good
Sex
God.
is they are consumed with sex. Sex is what they're talking about.
What is that?
Oh, it's an online, the Muslim issue worldwide. What's it called? Muslims worldwide.
When you deny sex, you become consumed with sex. And when you put people in a burqa and the sex has to go somewhere, it's one of Maslow's physiological needs. Sex has to go somewhere. Maslow.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Sounds like they're going to the zoo.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's going to the zoo. Yes, it does.
Yes.
Sounds like it's going to the zoo on what time?
You need to put a burqa
11.
on Skippy.
Put a Burke on Skippy. 11 minutes past 5 o'clock on a beautiful Monday afternoon in rainy
Yes.
Florida,
Yes.
South Florida. WNN 1470 on the AM dial. Tom Trento here with CJ, Mike, Mark, Damon, and hi, Abdullah. How was your weekend?
Hello, Imam.
Very good. Very nice weekend. Hello, kuffars. Hello, infidels.
What was jiggy at the mosque on Friday?
Oh, it was a jamming Juma on Friday. We make the prayers. We curse the Jews. We curse the Christians. We bang our head on the floor. It was glorious.
Good time.
We have
Okay.
such good time.
All right. Well, we have somebody that you may want to ask a question or two a little later. Who knows? All right. A lot of things going on in the world, folks, and
Are they ideological anomalies?
there are ideological anomalies. Yeah, an ideological anomaly
Anomaly.
is collateral damage. Another term for collateral damage in the Obama administration.
Negative externalities.
What did you call it?
Negative,
Negative
externalities.
Oh,
Well-
also known as dead Americans.
Yes.
What was Pfeiffer's first name? The guy Dan Pfeiffer, the Obama communications specialist, who was all over 5 shows. What is it with 5 shows? The Obama people throw somebody out on Sundays for 5 Sunday shows. Pfeiffer was there, communications expert for the White House, basically pushing back so hard on every one of these scandals. There are no scandals. There's nothing there. Let's get on. The president's fantastic, and the world's a wonderful place. And it was sad, watching these young guys they throw out there to get chewed up.
They just lie constantly. They lie.
They're lying, and they're all in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s, and they're sharp, and they have become the fodder for the administration to say, "Your turn."
It's your turn.
Yeah.
They're going to be emotionally scarred for life.
God. So, in any event, the common theme, folks, is very, very simple. We're on the eve of destruction, okay? And somebody's got to breathe some sense, some sanity, some explanation into the scenario that we have just described. Now, we can take out our rosy coloring pencils and pens and paper over this and make it look good, or we can dig down more deeply and find systemic and ongoing problems. The way to correct or resolve a disease is to find the cause of the disease. And we have with us a special guest who's done a tremendous amount of analytical research, tremendous amount of blood, sweat, and tears, digging for hours and hours, sitting in the library. Does anybody sit in the library anymore to do research? We'll ask our guest. But digging and
Scraping, and fingers coming out bloodied
Blood
and
on the
everything. It's
fingers
just,
and the
it's horrible. You just see
candlelight.
it, you feel sorry for her. You just have to give her Band-Aids and everything.
saw-
Just terrible.
I saw the Great Gatsby over the weekend, and in one scene, the writer of the Great Gatsby in the thing is just he's in a nut house basically, and the psychiatrist he's writing page after page after page with his pen, and it struck back to the days of pen and ink, which were nice days. I wonder, special guest,
Yes.
if you pick up pen and ink. Ms. Diana West, hello, how are you?
Just
Let's
fine,
welcome
thank
Diana
you.
West.
Everyone.
Wait, hang on.
She's here.
Wait, we're trying to.
Volume up.
Are you there?
I'm
No?
here.
Okay, there you are. Yes.
Yay.
We had some weather problems in the bunker. Do you pick up pen and ink these days?
I do. Occasionally. Sometimes I really want a pen and a pad to make notes on, and I scribble in my books with pens. So yes, I still have pens.
Okay, well, we're going to interview you today on your book, American Betrayal, on Extortion 17 press conference that we were at together, and several other issues. But first, we're going to tell you everything we believe. Everything we believe, okay? Now, my
Yes.
first question
In
for you.
200 words or less,
Yes.
tell us everything you know. Be general yet specific at the same time.
My first question for you, Diana, is
Yes.
when did you? I mean, you are syndicated in 100 newspapers. You've written
They
Death
keep
of the Grown-
closing, but about 100 or so.
Okay. Death of the Grown Up. You wrote an analysis of how stupid adults are, basically.
And why they're becoming dimmy.
Yeah,
Yes.
and why they're becoming dimmy. You have American Betrayal that'll be out in a couple of days. You write your blog extensively. When did you first realize that you wanted to communicate through the written word?
That I wanted to communicate through the written word?
Yes.
Oh, I was a small child. My father was a writer, and he used, at the time, fat green pencils to write books. And so I got some of those pencils and yellow pads like he did and thought I would be a writer too. I mean, it's as silly as that.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool, you know.
That is so funny.
You know,
I went through some other ideas along the way, but came back to it pretty naturally.
all right. Well, you were influenced by your dad. Now, what kind of writer was he?
He was a novelist and television and screenplay writer, and a conservative in Hollywood, and someone fascinated by the Cold War. He had been a veteran of World War II, and in fact, he makes a couple of cameo appearances in my new book, because his big war was between the invasion of Normandy. He was came ashore D-Day +2, the second day, or 2 days after, and he was finally taken out right before the Battle of the Bulge, which is why I am having this interview. He got sick just before the Battle of the Bulge began and was taken off the line before, basically, he was into Germany at this point, and his group suffered huge casualties. And in my book, I discover that maybe if it weren't for Soviet penetration of Washington, maybe those two battles might not have been necessary. What do you think of that?
Wow.
Wow.
So you are directly influenced by your dad, not only in terms of
What's your father's first name?
Elliot West.
Elliot West.
not only the optics of seeing this big green pencil in your dad's hands and the yellow pad and all of that, but in terms of content too. Now, when you went to school, did you study journalism and all those English and all of that, or what did you study?
Well, that's so nice of you to ask. I was an English major. I was almost a history major, but I had a kind of a blow up with the history professor in junior year seminar, and decided it was over Vietnam, and decided I would rather read fiction for the rest of my time in college. So I changed to English major senior year. A lot of books.
Yeah. What, in terms of the creative process, you know, any of us that do any writing or any communication of any sort, there's that creative process, the birthing of an idea to the presentation of it. Don't take us through the book yet, but just one of your articles for your blog. Let's say a 600 or 1,000 word article. Walk our listeners, our viewers, who may have some aspirations and may even have a little bit of skill in writing. What is the Diana West process?
Well, the process always has to be outrage. Because outrage drives my meter very quickly, and I'm able to produce. And most of my writing career, I've been a mother also, and so my time was quite limited, particularly in those early years. And so I realized I could no longer take assignments on just anything. I had to be totally self-motivated, and it had to be things that just drove me into white-hot firmament, so I could get them done by dinner.
So this is therapy to you. So you say this is therapy.
It used to work. That's interesting you should say that. For many years, with the weekly column, and then of course the incredible capabilities with blogging, it was therapy. And I would write a column about something horrible, and I'd feel great. And recently, it hasn't been working, and I just still pretty much feel horrible. But then I garden, so.
Oh, there you go. You balance it.
I do needlepoint.
I balance it somehow. But no, it used to be much more therapeutic, and I felt like I'd solved things. But lately, the press of these problems has it weighs heavy.
Yeah. The topic that we're dealing with, and the broad topic, folks, at 22 minutes past 5 o'clock on Monday, May 20th, here on TrentoVision, WNN 1470 on the AM dial, TrentoVision.tv on the internet. CJ right there, she is for real. Look, I'm touching her. There, see? That is you, right? I'm for real too. Okay. The topic that we're dealing with, the broad topic, is national security and all things West. Hey, that's a little play on words, isn't it? All things
There we go. All kinds of West here.
All things
the
of the
United
West.
West,
Yes.
Diana West.
Yeah, the Western civilization. It's nice how all these come together. But and we're getting a little bit into the labyrinth mind of Diana West, finding a little bit about when she was a young girl and picking up big green pencils and writing, and that journalistic pilgrimage to your most recent book. When do you know that your book is you're done? I have no more words, no more ink, no more revisions. I'm done.
Well, I want to get to what the book is.
Yeah, I know.
First.
But when do you know when you come to
That's
that
a
what
pretty
the book
fascinating
is.
question, actually.
I don't know that there's a formula. You just, there in the two books I've written, aside from our collaborative effort, the third book, Sharia the Threat, but the two books I've written all by myself, at a certain point, just like with a column of 800 words, there is a sense of closure you get to. And now, I could have kept going with this particular book, American Betrayal, but I think the depth of betrayal would have become exhausting if it isn't already. And I realized that it had come down to the personal level, in some ways like Extortion 17, coming down to the personal level of the families. The last betrayal I write about in the book in chapter 11, before the chapter 12, which is where I tie things together, is a personal betrayal in the sense it's about American servicemen. And the other betrayals start out in terms of complicity on the world stage, start out in terms of lying in more theoretical terms. We get to the war, there are tremendous betrayals in the war, and yet I felt that with the servicemen, I'm talking about the POWs left behind, thousands of them after World War II, which I don't think is on most people's radar. We've talked a lot about Vietnam and Korea even, but World War II, we left thousands of men behind in Soviet hands. I am convinced, the records show this. And there's something about the personal level that I realized was the end of the book, in terms of trying to reach the reader. And it just kind of naturally closed from there into the final chapter.
Well, we're going to get into the details of the book in a minute, but Mark, you had a question, and I think CJ had a question, and I'll explain one thing about Extortion 17, but go ahead.
One more thing about the book idea. I've written books for myself for educational material, and I know when I get to the end, it almost feels like it's a birth of a baby, and you know it's done when it's done. And is that because you go through different maturations of it, where you go through, okay, I really want to learn about the subject, I really want to get into it, and then after a while, towards the end, you just want to spit the sucker out because you know you're done. Do you get that way too?
Yes and no. I get a little sad when I'm done, and on this book I felt that way even more so than the first one. I like that creative process. I like that utter obsession, and I'll tell you, in this book, I, in a way, not to sound too loony, but I feel like I met some tremendous figures in our history whom I had never known before. The good part of American Betrayal, which is a very depressing, destabilizing book, I don't believe anyone will be able to read it without feeling their worldview shifting, if I'm effective anyway. But I was able to uncover forgotten heroes of our past, the truth tellers, the people who did not let the machine run them over, and even though history has forgotten them because they got written out of the narrative, they're there. And the positive part of the book, in some ways that the emotional core of the book for me, is finding those Americans and some non-Americans, but mainly Americans, and leaving them behind and finishing the book and not reading their memoirs, not following their notes. You kind of lose touch with them a little bit, but they're in the book.
Right.
And I can't wait to start, pushing them out there.
CJ has a question, but while she's asking it, can you get a copy of your book and hold it up for us?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Do I have one up here? I might have taken it
I
downstairs.
see the plaque on the.
Well, hey,
I see the plaque over your shoulder.
David, can you find maybe you can find a copy?
I
American
can get
Betrayal.
one off the wall, but
No, we'll find a copy. Oh,
not
you can't.
downstairs
Okay.
on a commercial
Maybe I
break.
can. All right, CJ, you asked the question.
Yes,
I'll look for
because we
Diana's
wanted-
book, and then does this give me a credit as collaborating with you?
No.
This will be our second book we collaborated on.
That's right.
Right. Hi. We want to tell everybody what is the name of the book, why did you write it, what's in it, why is it relevant
Oh, all
now?
the basic questions
All
you
the
mean?
basic
Oh, the
questions.
boring
We're talking
questions?
about this
Oh,
book.
God.
How did you
Get
feel
asked,
about
yes.
putting it down and finishing it? Let's talk about what it is.
Okay, we can do that.
Can we get
Sure,
to
I'd
that?
love to.
Yeah.
It's called American Betrayal,
Mhm.
The Secret Assault on Our Nation's Character. And it's a book I actually started writing after working for so many years trying to present the facts about Islam after 9/11 and finding the facts not making a dent, not just my column, but just it wasn't on a personal level that I was pushed, but just watching how facts about Islam did not seem to make a dent in our policy, and certainly in our policymakers' consideration when setting war policy. We have, of course, Stephen Coughlin, whose experience in terms of trying to brief the generals at the Pentagon with the facts of jihad went nowhere. And he, of course, went nowhere too. He was in 2008. His contract was not renewed.
He was disappeared.
Going to war without any comprehension of what Islam, Islamic culture, Islamic law is. And this perplexed me. And I decided there was this hollowness to us. There was this lack of courage in terms of facing facts. Now, this is something of a theme I first developed in The Death of the Grown-Up. I guess I was still perplexed and hadn't solved it with that book. And I decided to look for a precedent in our past. Have we had this problem before? Is this a new phenomenon? Can we look back and see this sort of habitual delinking of facts from conclusions? You know, just you cut off the connections between facts and conclusions in our society, between facts and judgment. And we all know about non-judgmentalism and so on. And I was looking really for the pattern that might exist in our past. And I found it. I found it in spades. I ended up, after some time, actually, there was a lot of reading before I really settled on my line of exploration. And I realized it had a lot to do with we would see similarities in our experience with communism. And I started reading back into the 1950s and looking at the great congressional investigators, the great congressional investigations. And I realized I read a great book, a tremendous book that really was my Rosetta Stone, Stanton Evans' Blacklisted by History, which is his book reconstructing the history of Joseph McCarthy. And he painstakingly reconstructed an entire archive to truly document Joseph McCarthy's life and investigations, and the conclusion is that he was right. He did tremendous work for the good of this country. He was a patriot, and he was taken down as the symbolic head of this attempt to take back our country, really, from what? I had to go back into the past again, and I found that Joseph McCarthy had predecessors himself, in particular Representative Martin Dies of Texas, who in 1938 opened up the House Committee on Un-American Activities. And he was investigating Italian fascism, Japanese Shintoism, German fascism, and communism. And I found out that his experiences actually paralleled McCarthy's. And again, I'm going back looking for more, and people tried to shut him up too, and tried to disconnect facts from conclusions too. So this is my theme.
Right.
And I ended up realizing that the whole thing really starts in terms of an institutional arc with FDR and his administration, and in particular, the November 16, 1933 recognition of the Soviet Union. The United States recognized the Soviet Union in 1933, reversing 4 presidents and 6 secretaries of state before this recognition. And the reason this is really the beginning is that agreement was a series of lies. It essentially, it's very short, it's one page. Sometime I'll try to put it up so people can actually read it. It basically makes the Soviet Union promise it will not organize secret cadres to overthrow the United States of America, will not support them, will not organize them, will not do anything to hurt America, and will certainly do nothing inside America. Well, of course, this was complete fabrication right from the start. It was already ongoing. It would only increase. And that agreement set the stage for the United States government to begin to lie. Because in order to keep that agreement, they had to pretend that the Soviet Union was keeping its bargain. And what I argue in the book is this essentially started us off institutionally, at the government level, with our elites, lying. And you start seeing the intrusion of double standards into our policies, into our thinking. And I was able to draw parallels between what we do with Islam today and what we do with communism in yesteryear.
Well, you
Very
seem to be journalistically indicting President Roosevelt, President Truman, President Eisenhower as covering up some of this, or deceiving, or
Yes, absolutely.
absolutely.
Oh yes, no. This is why it's called American betrayal. I mean, I didn't know any of this. I was just, as familiar with as everyone else, every other American, with the general history, the kind of thing you learn in your junior year of high school as a rule, and perhaps study it in more in depth in college, and pick up the popular biographies that draw your attention, or the World War II histories along the way. I was as floored as I hope readers will be at what I learned. Essentially, the complicity grows, and I take a reader through the various steps, the various historical markers of this complicity, which got ramped up during World War II. But what I was so betrayed by, and felt so betrayed by, was that our presidents, our White Houses, our governments, the dominant media, and so on, at a certain point became motivated more by cover-up than by anything else, than by patriotism, I would argue. And when you get to the late 40s and 1950s, when we had these incredible landmark investigations, which I hope Congress someday repeats, because we've not had a period of great congressional investigators for decades, you realize that what the investigators, the red hunters, are trying to do is try to get a handle on the utter penetration of our government and the cover-ups by every administration since. And in a way, they're like, what is that thing with the Tibetan monks feeling the elephant? They're blind, and they try to figure out what they're feeling. That's what it was like for them. And when you look at the great witnesses trying to get their stories out and being slammed and slandered, the parallels with today are really quite striking. But the indictment that the book offers on our leaders who have statues all around Washington is going to be controversial, but I do think the record supports it. And the other point about the book that will help explain how it sort of evolved is I discovered, as I was trying to read and figure out what's up, that all of the great intelligence history that's been written since archives opened in Moscow, in Washington, when the Soviet Union dissolved in the early 1990s, had never been integrated into our general understanding of history. It's kind of astonishing, because we're 20, 30 years from these revelations beginning. And if you go to the bookstores now and you pick up the latest biography of Ike, or World War II, or Yalta, they haven't added they don't even acknowledge the fact that the government was penetrated by Soviet agents. And when you put them together, that's when you see the shape of betrayal emerge, and that's what I try to do in the book.
Well, at 35 minutes past 5 o'clock on Monday the 20th, WNN 1470, Diana, we have a very intelligent listening and viewing audience, but there's a couple out there, because they call us up sometimes. There's a couple out there, as one of my former professors used to say, that they need to have the cookies taken down to the lower shelf and restate the thesis of the book very simply. Okay, now, Abdullah, are you listening?
I am listening.
Okay. Very simple, the thesis of your book, and CJ has a question.
Okay, it's as simple as possible. America, you have been lied to. Your government has been lying to you for 80 years, and what we believe is our history is a series of big lies. Big lies are things we associate with totalitarianism, but if you read my book, you will find out that the control of information has been going on in America, land of the free, for decades, and we have been victimized by it. And it is time to get the facts. How's that?
Okay, that's pretty simple.
And that's very apropos for today, seeing the current administration with the lies and everything that's going on
But you
right
know
now.
what?
you know?
She knew it was coming.
How much of a liar does the administration have to be? We could take our microphones, go outside, the first 10 people, and ask them who the vice president is. Guess how many are going to know who the vice president is?
Go away.
You're going to get 2 people that
Yeah,
maybe
I was
know
gonna
the
say
vice
two,
president.
yeah.
So
Right.
when you have a dumbed down constituency
Yeah.
or citizenry,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult to do a little smoke and mirrors at the top.
Yeah,
CJ.
the days of the
I'm
landowner
curious,
are
because
gone.
obviously the book is coming out next week on the 28th, and so I haven't read it yet, but one question I have is, did you find in your research that there was a difference between administrations who were performing this cover-up so as not to scare or terrify the citizenry versus administrations that might have been ideologically sympathetic to what they were covering up?
Well, that's a very good question, and unfortunately, I would say no. And I became even more cynical than I was when I went into this process. At a certain level of power, it seems that power corrupts, right?
Right.
The grip on power becomes the driver, it seems, and the motivation becomes to make the scandal go away. And whether it's Harry Truman, who didn't want to hear about what his code breakers were finding out from breaking Russian code, whether it was Eisenhower, who was complicit in some very ugly crimes against humanity during World War II, along with the rest of
Everybody.
alone. But it becomes a matter of once you've been silent, you become complicit. And I think these are lessons for today as well. And you no longer are able to absolve yourself by letting the facts out. And so the truth tellers take a Joseph McCarthy, who most people have heard of and think is the worst man in American history.
Right.
If he's trying to break open this incredible conspiracy, and now we know from the big intelligence experts that we had at least some 400 or 500 identified agents in Washington, strategically placed, some more successful than others to be sure, but it was like, I argue in the book, it was an occupation. We're talking about a strategic occupation of our power centers. If Joseph McCarthy is getting close, what do you want to do? You want to slam, you want to just destroy Joseph McCarthy, which is what happened. And this is the pattern over and over again. And as I noted, there are many people in the book who come in for this same treatment. These truth tellers, I don't know what else to call them in our past, who I was able to kind of discover for myself in going back. And this is all in plain sight. It just is really mostly in out of print plain sight, or in the newspapers and the records. These people were aware of what was going on. It's not like this was brand new, 20 years ago, but it had been covered over. And I really feel that what we're going through with Islam today, and Islamic penetration and Islamization, we are seeing the same pattern of just steamrollering the facts to make a nice, smooth narrative. It's pretty good. That's not a bad metaphor.
Yeah,
But I think that's what happens, and then that's where the mainstream goes. And at a certain point, I feel very fortunate to have stumbled onto this, because honestly, why would anyone suspect such things? But it starts making sense in a very kind of brutal way.
I guess what I don't understand is, what is the primary motivation for covering up something that is a national security or domestic security threat to the United States to begin with? Where does that come from? Why does the government have an interest in covering up its lack of interest in protecting the United States of America? Where I thought that was its primary function, and if they're not going to do that, what do we need them for?
Well, if you go back to FDR, You go back to the early 30s, a time of depression, a time when the Soviet Union was extremely popular in the minds of our elites. And in terms of the personnel in the Roosevelt administration, you had all manner of just straight up Marxists, if not Soviet agents, entering government in legions. Washington was, I think, more so than today. And the push by these people, whether Marxist fellow travelers, dupes, or agents, was I'm hanging this phone up. Was in terms of influencing policy to favor the Soviet Union. And Roosevelt was someone who truly believed in power. He admired Stalin. Goodness, I can see who that is. I can make it go away one more time.
They're persistent. Maybe it's your local Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Hello, we're from the federal
It's your
government.
publishing
and we're here
agent.
to help.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But he believed in something called convergence between the Soviet system and the American system. And I always thought that was maybe a 1970s sort of Zen notion. But he believed in it. And he goodness. Anyway.
The way you hang up a phone, you take it off the
Diana,
hook.
it's the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I think I got unconnected.
Who are you on Skype with?
She's having trouble. She has the phone that rings no matter. It's like a candle you blow out on the birthday.
You're not talking to that hater Trento, are you?
Right.
Trento alert.
There was great sympathy with Soviet policies in the 1930s. The
Right.
war, I argue in the book, was actually subverted. The war itself was subverted to bring the Soviet Union to greater power, to bring the Soviet Union into Europe. I mean, this is very controversial stuff.
Well, they
in
took
some
a lot
books.
of casualties for us. So we definitely had an interest during World War II in promoting the Soviet Union as an ally because, I mean, they had millions of people lost that could have been ours. But
No, I
then
don't
when we
think-
got to the 50s, we couldn't switch back of saying, no,
Little
they
tough.
really are the enemy.
Yeah.
Well, I actually don't agree. I think the Soviets would, of course, waste any number of millions of its own people to do anything. I mean, witness the terror famine, the purges, the gulag. I mean, there's no value of any human life in the Soviet Union under Stalin or any of their leaders. But no, I actually don't agree after this research. I know that theory has become particularly in vogue. I think probably the most stunning research I did involved what I had never heard of, the anti-Hitler German resistance. For example, just to give you an idea of what our true motivation was, there was a series of attempts made out of Germany. The earliest one I found that seemed significant began in 1942, which was really before any American troops had been sent overseas to fight the war. Of course, we had the war in the Philippines going on, and we'd already lost thousands of men in the Japanese war, which Roosevelt did not want to fight, just putting it out there, always oriented toward the war that Stalin was fighting, not saving our own men in the Pacific. The Tea Party of yesteryear, the isolationists, the Heartland, whatever you want to call them, they were very upset that there was no relief sent to MacArthur on the Philippines when we had the Bataan Death March and Corregidor, these terrible, excruciating battles. They were ignored. It's utterly astonishing when you
weren't
start
even there.
thinking, like, what's that about? I'm afraid I believe it's about this influence to only cater to the Soviet Union. But in 1942, you had the first feelers being put out in a significant way that I could find from Germans not interested at that White House, and the kind of people who were involved in making the decisions. Lachlan Curry, for example, an aide to Roosevelt, he's later unmasked as a Soviet agent. The last thing they wanted to do was to have a peace in Germany that would end the war with the Soviet Union still inside Russian boundaries, not into its
Not
satellite
into its
countries.
empire.
Right, the empire didn't exist. This happened throughout 1943. It's quite fascinating. If you ever want to go into the details on the different movements, it's really quite interesting. But all through 1943, reaching out, the head of German intelligence was trying to reach out to America and Britain And the thing that you find out, for example, the spy chief of Britain during the war was a man named Menzies, and when he died, I believe in the 50s, or he died in the 60s, his obituary, which is not very long in the New York Times, I mean, it was okay, but, not a real long story, notes that this reach out from Canaris was his name in Germany, and said that maybe something could have happened, except there was great fear of offending the Russians. Does that sound familiar with today's world?
Well, let's make that. Let's make that. Hang on. Let's make that. Let's make that
parallel
bridge.
would be like the Velvet
Hang on one
Revolution
second.
in Iran.
Wait, let's
that,
hang
that
on.
we didn't
CJ,
support.
hang on one second.
Sorry.
Let's make this connection now because we're starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
The bridge from American Betrayal, your analysis of the metrics in World War II, where there was this coddling, this collaboration, assisting the Soviets, to today, in terms of the Muslim Brotherhood, Islam, but in the context of the press conference Extortion 17, where you, myself, Mark, were a week or two ago. Put all that together for us in about 5 minutes.
Well, I think that the operational underpinnings here are what we go through 9/11, and we're told Islam is a religion of peace, right?
Yes.
We're still told Islam is a religion of peace. This is sort of the big lie. The book, in many ways, is a history of big lies. Our history as a series of big lies.
Okay.
Islam as a religion of peace is the big lie we are living through. We look back at the communist era, and we're talking about history, but we're living through that today. The people in the administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, who put that over, I believe, are the same people who crafted the rules of engagement in Afghanistan that permitted the Chinook helicopter carrying all those SEALs and other Americans to be fired upon without firing back. Fear of offending Islam, fear of offending locals, fear of offending Taliban, winning hearts and minds. These are the mental problems that America was actually, literally, I mean, it translates perfectly, was working with during World War II, believing communism had changed its spots. Well, we think Islam is a religion of peace, believing that they don't want anything but democracy. Well, this is the basis of the democracy project. This kind of mind game and subversion is directly parallel. When we look at the press conference, you see the government wheels turning, trying to make these people go away, trying to make their concerns inconsequential. And so in that sense, the mechanisms are very similar. It's eerie, actually. In the 30s, you had Americans, 2,000 of them had gone over to the Soviet Union, lured by promise of jobs during the Depression. They ended up in the Gulag. Their single voices did nothing in Washington. There's a whole, literature of their letters from families pleading for help. That's very similar to the families of Extortion 17, pleading for help. Little people. The mechanism of the government runs them over. Very similar for an ideological end.
Part of the narrative, the aggressive narrative at the press conference on May 9, was the politicization of the military, particularly the generals and flag officers. So their collaboration with, endorsement, support for Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, either directly or indirectly, was more for personal political interest and advancement than covering up. Oh, I'm asking you, was it more for personal political advancement than covering up something, a situation that you're analyzing in American Betrayal? I'm trying to sort those two pieces out.
We won't know until we can ask them, and that's why we need select committees or just congressional committees to address these issues. Take the Katyn Forest massacre that took place in Poland, where the Soviets killed 20,000 Poles. This event, a mass, crime against humanity, was hidden by the American government until Congress looked at it in 1951, 8 years later. It was in official American press, Voice of America, and therefore in American press, referred to mostly as a German atrocity, even though the facts were known. The facts were there. Right. Congress looked at it in 1951 and reversed these lies. That's what we need today. And in terms of motivation of the officers or the policymakers, we don't know until somebody gets to ask them. And that is Congress's responsibility, people. I mean, talk about action points, right? They have to be put under oath and asked about these things. They cannot escape responsibility. With Katyn, it took a great journalist, Julius Epstein, who put it together in a couple of large pieces in probably about 1949, 1950, got the attention of Congress, had these hearings, got the record, realized there was incredible subversion, communist subversion of the Defense Department and so on that was helping in this cover-up for 8 years. Churchill was complicit, Roosevelt was certainly complicit, Truman, of course. Finally got the truth out. Well, that's very important. That's what we need. That's what we need today.
How do these hearings work if these flag officers, if they've had the politically correct Kool-Aid, really what they're doing is lying to themselves. So how do you get the truth out of people who are already self-deluded?
Well, hopefully you subpoena their emails and you look at the documents. I mean, if there's a crime here, if there's a cover-up here, there could very well be a paper trail. And you know, it does take clear-minded congressional leaders, and we have to hope that they exist, but it can be done. Certainly can be done. Right now, with Extortion 17, we don't know basic facts about what happened. I was actually looking at the military investigation. There's a very short executive summary by General Colt, 5 pages. And I was looking for something more because I'm not a military correspondent. I don't have great experience with military investigations, but the ones I have looked at, for example, Ganjgal, looking at the shoot-up at the Afghanistan airport, Kabul airport, they're fairly long narratives. This one seems so short to me. And there's just a ton of stuff in PDF, individual interviews, about over 1,000 pages, I think, to pour through. I mean, it was a very hasty investigation. It needs to be more painstaking. The family's questions need to be discussed with investigators who can ask them in a hearing. I mean, this is how you establish the record. And I would say one thing I learned from my research was, thank goodness we had congressional investigators brave enough to do this, because without what they did, starting in the late 40s and going through the 50s and actually beyond, they left us with a record. We have a record. We have our history because of what they did. You let this stuff go, the people die, there are no more affidavits to be had, the records are destroyed or go off into disparate archives. I mean, this is important for the here and now and for posterity. I mean,
well, how do we help these? How do we help these little people, these families of Extortion 17, to get justice and get the truth out? How can ordinary people help them?
Along with that, we're coming down to just a few minutes, Diana. And in light of that question, how do we help the little people there and the Benghazi situation? Before Benghazi was Extortion 17. And we're drawing a parallel, folks, today on the 20th of May on TrentoVision.tv. with our special guest, Diana West, and her newly published book out when? When is it out? The 20th?
May 28th.
May 28th, next week. We're drawing a parallel from the betrayal of the American government in World War II and following to the betrayals today, in particular, 2 events, Extortion 17, August 6, 2011, the shootdown of the largest loss of special warfare life in naval history, SEAL Team 6 members, and Benghazi, September 11th, 2012. We're tying all of this together. Give us some concluding thoughts of how to help the little people, the families of the dead in Benghazi, and what do we do about our government? What can an average person do to make some noise on this?
Well, those are great questions. I don't know any answers more than anyone else. You have to start with your local representatives, though, and people who get them to come home and talk to them at town halls. I mean, these are just natural questions that should be asked. I don't know any other mechanism beyond that, because it's Congress that has the power. I feel almost like we're in a fairy tale period where Congress is sleeping, like Sleeping Beauty, and needs to be awakened. Congress has all the powers it needs to investigate these and many other scandals. They have subpoena power. They have their leadership doesn't want to use it, which is another big problem. Again, going to the notion of elites being poisoned or corrupted by power.
They don't want to offend anybody.
Sure, but it's vox populi. I don't know what else you do in a democracy. there are no magic answers, but there is a basic mechanism for rectifying these things, holding people accountable, and we almost have to rediscover it.
Yes.
No, I'm
Oh,
good. Yeah.
no. Look, folks, these are big issues, and one of the reasons why we have Diana West on today is to continue on that educational process of providing new information, more information, to hopefully do what is required by Diana when she writes, to get infuriated with something.
Yeah.
And if this information doesn't begin to infuriate you, yes, you are, along with our Congress, asleep at the wheel, or any other sleeping metaphor you want.
Yeah.
But I have found this kind of activism stuff, that there is no knockout blow. It's that continual, aggressive, strong, intelligent,
Just keep hitting back.
passionate. Yeah, just keep
Keep
moving
hitting
forward,
back.
moving forward. Hit back, hit back, hit back, and argue for truth. You know, we have the
Exactly.
intro to this show. You know, the truth will set you free. We believe the West is good. The principles. We believe that the American government is articulated and initiated by human beings. They fail at times, and they're flawed at times. That's why we have a self-correcting system that ought to work. Doesn't always. When it doesn't, we throw the bums out, and that's maybe what we
That's what we need to do.
doing now.
Everybody go now.
Yeah, you know. But Diana, give us a closing thought on what you hope your book can accomplish in the life of the readers.
Well, I hope it helps them realize they were sold a line of goods in terms of what we've been taught is our history, because our history is important. We can't defeat Islamic jihad, the spread of Islam, until we rectify, I believe, till we rectify our own flaws and failings regarding our past experience with communism. They're very similar, and we are being subverted again in very similar ways, and there's no way we can deal with these facts frontally until we deal with our past and realize it's happening again. And it can be very successful, this terrible penetration, unless, I think, we discover that we actually have the answers and that we have to face the facts as before and now, and that it really is as simple as that. It's as truth will set you free if you face it and act on it and hold leaders accountable.
Are you ready for an onslaught from the lefties and the
And the
commies and everybody else once your book
I
is
think
out?
everyone. It's going to upset everyone because it's sort of ecumenical in its condemnation.
I hate it already.
Yeah, Imam Abdullah hates your book already. So, hey, we're out of time, Diana West.
Wow.
Thank
you so much
We
for
were only
spending
going
the
to
time.
have you for about 30 minutes, but
Yeah.
it was so good, so
Right.
nice. And hopefully this time the show will actually work. You know, we'll get it up on the air.
Yeah,
So
it works.
5 o'clock, folks. What is it now? Just 30 seconds, 20 seconds left. Tom Trento saying goodbye for the whole crew here. How much time do we have?
3,
2, 1.
2, 1,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
everybody. We'll see you, Diana.
Thank you.